She said, "You don't know?" And I said, "I don't know what." And she said, "My father is your father."
Hello, you are listening to NPE Stories. This is a podcast where NPEs can share their story. I am your host, Lily, and I found out I was an NPE through an ancestry DNA test that changed my life forever. NPE is a term that stands for Not Parent Expected or Non-Paternal Event. This means that one or more of our parents are not who we believe them to be. NPE Stories is a podcast where NPEs can share their story of what their original family was like, how they found out they were an NPE, and what their journey has been like since the day they found out. Welcome to episode 203, and today I am speaking with Caroline. Hi, Caroline.
Hi, sweetheart. So nice to be talking to you.
So nice to be talking to you. This was one of the more confusing time differences I've ever had to schedule.
Well, there you go. I'm happy you were the first.
You are 2.5 hour time difference than me. I didn't even know that existed.
There
honestly.
You go. Yeah.
Can I say it's Newfoundland time?
Newfoundland. You have to come and visit. It's a beautiful, beautiful province.
Oh, it sounds beautiful.
Watch the whales play and the icebergs, and we have a season for everything.
Sounds beautiful. Thank you so much for scheduling time with me today.
More than welcome.
Okay, so let's get into your story today. We are calling this Caroline Sorg's story, episode 203.
Mm-hmm.
So tell me about your family of origin. Who was in your family of origin and what your childhood was like?
Okay. Who was in my family? I'm the youngest of 4 kids. I was raised by my grandmother and my grandfather, and my mother died when I was 4. That was in 1965. My mother died when she was 35, and she was abandoned by her husband. After my mother died, my grandparents did come to our family home to take care of us 4 kids. And with them came my mother's youngest brother. He was about 21 at the time, and he was a monster in my childhood, and as well as my siblings. My mother married an American. There's an Air Force base here, Pepperell Air Force Base, and she met my birth certificate father. Unfortunately, he is on my birth certificate here at Pepperell, and she married him in the U.S. So they were married, and they were stationed in Arizona, where my mother had 2 children, and my brother, he's the oldest, and a sister. And so anyway, he was out late at night and coming home with lipstick on the collar, all that sort of thing. And apparently I heard from a person in Alabama that he beat her in the street one night. And so she ended up going to a Salvation Army lodge with the newborn, pretty much, and her 2 children. And the Salvation Army raised money and got her back home to Newfoundland. She tried to get help to raise her family home in Newfoundland, and apparently this guy had left the state and left the Air Force. So she was unable to, have any help to raise her children. So she stayed with my grandmother until she was able to find some work. And, I guess with donations from my grandmother, she managed to get through. She was home for about 3 years, and she had the privilege of shopping at the Air Force Base. And while she was there, alone apparently, she was waiting to get a bus home. And this man, who ended up being my biological father, asked her if she wanted to drive home. And she accepted. And he had a family in Ohio. And I'm the youngest on both sides. His oldest was 14 and his youngest was 7. He had 3 girls. So he had a relationship with her, and they were kind of like playing house when he was here in Newfoundland. And, took up baby pictures. He was a photographer in the Air Force, took my baby pictures, which I didn't know, but I do know now, and even pictures of my siblings. So moving forward with that, life was hellish. Living, my grandmother was a beautiful grandmother, and she said, we have to protect this little girl. And she certainly tried her best. And I was well fed and the best dressed in my classroom. And she didn't show much love, but I could certainly feel the love from her. And my siblings, I just absolutely adored. So my uncle, who was really jealous, he had a drinking problem. And he was very jealous because my grandmother did have a tendency to spoil everybody. And he had her love for all those years, and now to move into our home with 4 little kids. But we had no mother and no father, so grandma took on the job. He, was always fighting and terrorizing us. And I was just like a happy kid, I just wanted to go out and play. I never had any toys, and just wanted to play. And that was good enough for me. And there was one time I was in my bed and he was fighting with my grandmother, and it was probably about taking care of us. And I heard her screaming, David, don't hurt her. And he ran into my bedroom. And actually, it was my grandmother's bedroom because I slept with her and I was in the bed. And my oldest sister was really scared, and she happened to be standing by the bed. And when she heard him coming, she jumped in the closet. And I could see the curtain shaking. Back then there were curtains. There didn't seem to be closet doors. And I could see the curtain shaking. I was wondering what was happening. And he runs into the room and he has a knife in his hand and he jabs it to my throat. And I can hear my grandmother, David, don't hurt her. She's screaming, don't hurt her. And I could look at the closet and see the closet curtain shaking. And I said, oh my God, I don't want him, because I just adored my sister. I clung to her when my mother died. I don't want him to hurt her. So I took my gaze over to the window, and he finally just got up and walked away. Now, my sister can't remember all this. She's been really injured too, because she lost our mom when she was 11, and she ended up playing the husband role, having to take my mother to her treatments because she passed away with cervical cancer. And she ended up having to take mommy to appointments and what have you. So she's really injured. And then it was a time of, I was about 7, got my tonsils out at the hospital here, and I was dropped off at the hospital, and nobody came to see me for 10 days. I was like, where is everybody? Nobody came. My grandmother never had a car, but at that time, nobody came. I was just by myself, and I was my mother's world. I was my mother's world, and I think this is what's got me in this position, because I think there's a lot of jealousy, I was clinging to my big sister all the time. And then she was 12 and turning 13 and meeting boys. And then she was gone. And so was my middle sister. She was gone. Of course, my brother was like 8, 9 years older than me. So he was gone anyway. So I was essentially raised by myself, alone. And I was fine. School was difficult because I always felt really weird, different. And so I kind of held back rather than make friends easy. That changed probably when I was late elementary. And, I still am, a little reserved. I think people can tell that I've been injured. I've been told that when someone got to know me a little better, that there's something going on. And here I think I'm wonderful. I'm doing wonderful. So that's about that. This uncle was a terror, and he terrorized my sisters and my brother. I remember one time going to school, and the last thing I saw as I closed the door was him just punching my brother. He was only a kid, really, and just laying him flat out over the sofa. And I had to go to school, just tears running down my face.
Oh, I'm so sorry. This is very hard to hear.
Worried about.
So sorry. So sorry you went through this.
So things got a little bit better. My uncle moved out. He ended up having a little boy and married and what have you. And things settled down. This new baby sort of, brought us more of a calmness, because now my grandmother's attention was on this little boy, and he was liking that. And sometimes I would go there and babysit. And I remember one time I did, and his wife was gone out. And they called me to babysit because he was really drunk. And when I went to the house, he was like on the sofa. And he had two little boys at this time. And we were like on our bellies, leaning on our hands, elbows on the floor, like watching this big TV, the old floor TV. And all of a sudden I heard this like water. And I turned around. And I was probably Lily about 14 or 13 then. I turned around and here he was lying down on the sofa. He had his penis pulled out and he was peeing on the floor.
Oh, God.
So I took these two beautiful little boys. These boys did not belong in an environment like that, Lily. They were precious. And I scooped them up and shielded them. And the oldest little boy remembers this, and he was probably about 7. And brought them up and said, you must go to bed. And, I'm going downstairs, and got them all tucked in. They were so sweet, and they stayed where they were. And on my way down the stairs, my uncle had gotten up, and he was like ricocheting from wall to rail, and I managed to get under his arm and continue on downstairs. So after a little while, he starts calling my name, Caroline. And I was pretty fast on my feet, pretty agile. I still am fairly like that today. So I said, okay, he's pretty out of it. I think I'll go up and see what he wants. And I went up and I turned on the light. He said, turn off the light. And I turned it off. And he said, I want you to come here. I said, Uncle Dave, I'm sorry. I can't come here. He said, turn off the light and come here. I said, no, I'm sorry. And I went downstairs, and then I called this little guy that we were kind of like boyfriend and girlfriend, and he came out and sat with me until the wife got home. And I didn't tell his wife, and I would never tell my grandmother because I was afraid that she would keep me from going out there and I wouldn't see my little cousins anymore. So a lot of it was like secrecy. Life was like that with me. And I remember one time when I was about 16, my grandmother showed me a picture of me, and I was probably 1. And she said, see that picture there, Caroline? And I said, yes, Grandma. And she said, Mommy had a friend, and he took that picture of you. And I said, okay, great. And I left, continued walking out the door. So here we go. That was a little opener when I found out that she couldn't come and tell me exactly, the rest of what was on her mind, but she didn't say anything. But I walked away thinking, well, thank goodness Mommy had a friend, and it wasn't all doom and gloom. She was trying to move on with her life. But she was actually sick when she carried me, Lily. Yeah, I got her medical report, and she was sick probably 2 or 3 years. She was misdiagnosed. They thought it was because her husband had left her. And, so she was, until the lump came out on her neck, and it had gone right through her body. But they just passed her off as being neurotic, right?
Yep.
So, as an adult, I was getting these feelings from my sisters, especially, that I was always the odd guy out, and they were always together. And it started really young and into my adulthood, and they were actually being kind of cruel, and went on for years and years. And I think actually, including this time away where I've been ostracized from the family, it's been about like 16, 17 years in total in my life that I hadn't spoken. Like the girls would be mad with me or one silly thing or another. Very narcissistic, let me tell you that. And so, anyway, just treated me different. And I thought it was a little sister syndrome, baby sister. These girls were really tight, But the middle sister used to go to Florida and bring home a gift when she'd come home, and she would give it to my bigger sister right in front of me. Or, so this was going on lots. And I was like, oh my God, like go out to dinner with them. And 2 of them would talk as if I was not there. And I'm having a dinner party. And what are you going to bring? They would do this in front of me and not invite me. Okay, you guys are really a piece of work, I would be thinking. And so we got on like that. And just this very poor treatment, picking on me. And one time my sister called and she said, oh, we had a birthday party here for her son, who we were very close to, and not naming my sister, but, my sister so and so came in, dropped in, and she even went as far as giving me the whole menu. I had to lay the phone down and say, can you just wait a minute, and go in the bathroom and cry and come back and take the phone and say, what were you saying? And just exclude me. So anyway, I'm going to go, like, essentially just get to where my discovery was.
As a child, when you were being raised with your grandparents, who did you think was your dad? Who were you told?
I'm sorry, Lily. Yeah. We all had the same father.
Oh, yep. Okay. So
we all had the same father.
That's what you were told. Okay.
That's what I was told. And I remember as a little girl, I must have been asking for my dad because I knew my mom was gone, but I knew that I still had a father. And I used to ask for him. And one day, these two pictures were put in my lap. And they said, that's your daddy. And it was his Air Force pictures. And they really kind of scared me because they're like passport pictures. They're very, And I didn't ask to see them anymore. And so they were gone. Not only were they gone from my memory because I was only very small. So they were gone. And so all through my life, I've been wanting to find my dad. I've been telling, family, cousins, and even calling Alabama, getting lists, because I had no information on this birth certificate father who I thought was my father, no information at all. And I would call Alabama and get numbers from the directory and call people to say, are you my daddy, sort of thing, or my daddy's family? And so I did that for years. And then finally, one day, not probably about 9 years ago, I just took all this information and I threw it in my wood stove. I said, I'm done. I'm seriously done with this guy and what have you. And I'm just going to move on with my life. So my sister had a party and I went over, and I would always go to the middle sister because she was a little more relaxed than my older sister. She was like the matriarch of the family, my big sister. And so I'd always go to the middle sister and say, for years, help me find our dad. Let's try and find our dad. And no, Caroline, we're not going there. We're not going there. So the last time I said that to her was at a house party, and she must have went to my older sister because my older sister came to me minutes after and said, I won't name my son. He looks just like our dad. And I said, I know. I've been telling you that for years. And that put a bee in my bonnet to start this again. So I got home, and a couple of days later, this program was on where this woman was left at the hospital stairs, and as a newborn, she had absolutely no identification. And I won't get into her story, but she did find her family. And I said, my God, I have some information. I should be able to do the same. So I picked up my iPad and I went in to my maiden name association, actually, I'm going to say it, Lily, the Vance Family Association. And I wrote a 101 version of my plight this time, very, paragraph, and put it down. I didn't even know. When I went to enter in I didn't even know the Vance Family Association came up. But I went in there and I sent this letter, mail. And before I went to bed, I picked it up and there was this guy. And he said, Caroline, I just read your email. Is this your family? And is this your mother and this your father? And I said, my God, yes. He said, we have all your family on Ancestry. And I went, oh my God. Oh my God. It's like finding Jesus or finding Santa Claus. Like, oh my God. Now, meanwhile, I wasn't talking to my sisters, and they wanted nothing to do with their father for abandoning them. Nothing. So here I am, a year out from speaking to them, got this information. Anyway, I called my kids and they were there, Mom, slow down, slow down. And I said, guys, you've been after me for years about this. What are you telling me to slow down? I don't have much time. I'm 58 years old. I got to, really dig in and find out, what's going on. And I did. And through it all, I found my birth certificate father's younger brother, my Uncle Jim, who was a lifesaver. And he obviously didn't know about me. He knew that there were 3 children. And obviously he didn't know where his brother was. And, I guess he presumed that he came back to Newfoundland and voila, that's what I thought, and I was born. And so I flew down, took my young son, went to Texas. Uncle Jim was in Texas, found out where my birth certificate father was buried, and went to the cemetery. The cemetery was closed that day, but he did us a favor and went and unlocked it. And we got in, and it was in a pauper's cemetery. He was in a pauper's grave. And his headstone was just as big as a soap of bar, smaller, maybe half the size, and it was just JV or his initials. That's it. No date of birth, no, nothing. And we left and had a beautiful road trip to Tyler, Texas, where I spent 3 days getting to know my Uncle Jim, who wasn't my uncle. And and so he wasn't forthcoming with any information, told me nothing, wouldn't even tell me if he was dead or alive. I didn't want to push any buttons or make anyone angry or put them on the hot seat. I was just even happy with having my Uncle Jim, who wasn't my uncle. So during that visit, he said, baby girl, I want you to come back. I want you to come back. He said, I want to take you home. So I did. And this time I did it by myself and went there to Texas and spent 2 or 3 days with my Uncle Jim in his home. And then we did the road thing. I drove with an 85-year-old man to Alabama with his wife in the back. And it was pretty scary. But we got there, we arrived. And where I was welcomed by about 60 people, they had a family reunion to welcome me home.
Oh, wow.
So I soaked all that in. I was pinching myself, wanting to eat it all up. I was remembering everything, and my memory is not that great, but I was just soaking everything up, and the dates and the people, and went to the cemeteries and visited my grandparents, great-grandparents, just took it all in. And I feel really balanced in life now. I know. I would really love to be able to share that with my 2 sisters, all this, but man, I'm afraid I can't do that. So I came home, and I had a kind of a heads up that something was going on, really, because I called an old aunt. Actually, it was an uncle that terrorized me, his wife, and I had mentioned that I had found my dad. I didn't say our dad. I said my dad. That threw her off. She let the cat out of the bag, and she said, my darling, I knew there were always 2 fathers when I came into this family. And I said, what did you just say about my dad and my mom? What did you? And then she realized she had messed up, and she hung up. I was thinking, my God, Mommy was sick. How could that be? I mean, this is not making sense. And I wouldn't call my sisters because they would not give me the satisfaction. I mean, obviously it was kept from what I couldn't even, no, it wasn't true. So I wasn't even going to get in contact with them. So I finally got in contact with an old uncle in Alabama and told him I was coming. And Uncle Howard, I'm coming to see you, and I can't wait. And he said, you can't be Joe's daughter. He was in his 90s. You can't be Joe's daughter. Strike 2. Nobody said anything. And in my family, see, there was no secrets. Everybody knew everything, even if it was to hurt you, aunts and uncles and all this. I mean, they were all crazy. And if there was something that could hurt me or my sisters, because we were always known as little Yanks, even though I was born here, my 3 siblings were born in the States, but we were always known as little Yanks. So if anybody had the chance to hurt me or hurt any of us, I guarantee that was going to happen. So I was thinking, well, somebody would have said something. I would have learned. So no, this is all bullshit, what I'm hearing here now. Excuse my English. Still wasn't sitting with me well. And my son called me from work and he goes, Mom, I did a DNA test today. And I said, oh, why did you do that? He said, Mom, look, my boss did it for me for my birthday. It's not like I'm going to murder anyone, Mom, but I did one. And I said, oh, goodness sake. Okay, it's done. Sent in, it's done. Okay. So however long it took to get his results back, I get a phone call one day. And he said, Mom, I have a really strong origin to Germany. And I said, well, that can't be because we're English Irish. And he said, oh, no, that's really powerful. And I said, oh, okay, fine. So we talked a little bit, we hung up, and I said to my husband, Kevin, can you order me a DNA test, please? And he, no, I'm not doing that. I'm not doing it. I said, we could have brought home the wrong baby from the hospital. And I knew that wasn't it. I just knew that it was the other, something was going on. I said, order me a DNA test now. And he did. And it came. And I did my thing. And it came back. And yeah, Houston, we've got a problem. I connected with a nephew because we left it both ends open. I was able to message him. And I'm pretty illiterate with all this stuff, but I did manage to navigate and find, who I was closest and sent him a message. And, I said, hey, Chris, it's Caroline. We, really closely related. And he goes, yeah, I can see that, Caroline. I said, where are you in Newfoundland? Thinking that nobody else can live off this island. But I've never heard of that before. And I said, you haven't? Well, we're so closely related. Like, why don't I know you? And he said, well, I don't know. And I said, well, this is what's happened with me. I just found, was messaging him. I found my family finally. I said, my dad was in the Air Force. Would you be a product of an affair? Like, can you help me piece this together? We have to find out how we're related. I said, I'm really, really happy. I said, after all these years, I finally found my family. I'm so happy. So he said, Caroline, the Air Force triggered him because his grandfather was my father. And that's probably what he was thinking of. To me, he said, I'm going to toss this around in the family and I'll get back to you when I can. And I said, okay, thank you. So about 10 minutes later, he messages me back. And he said, Caroline, I did share this with my mother and there's something you need to know. And I'll call you, I'll message you when I get home from work. I said, no, Chris, no. You have to tell me what's going on here. And he said, okay, here is a phone number. It's my mother. She's going to be waiting for your call. And Lily, usually I am all alone when I really need someone. People are working. I mean, I don't need anybody to babysit me, but just the way things end up, I've always been alone. And so I said, okay, thank you very much. And I had this long distance number there and I looked at the phone. And since finding out like the Vance family and, when this gentleman told me I have your family on Ancestry, Lily, I couldn't stop. It's like a domino effect. Everything was just like boom, 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 boom. I couldn't slow it down. Everything was opening up for me to receive what I was going to receive during that phone call. So I looked at the phone and it was like a movie being played out. And I reached for it and I walked to the kitchen and I entered in her phone number. And she says, hello. And I said, hi. I said, my name is Caroline. And she said, hi, my name is. And I said, yes. She said, you don't know? And I said, I don't know what. And she said, my father is your father. And I said, what? What did you just say? And I slid down the cupboards and I said, and I was hitting the floor. I said, no, I just found my dad. I just found my family. No, what are you saying? She said, Caroline, nobody told you? I said, no, nobody told me. No, I don't want this. I just found my family after 58 years and you're telling me this. Caroline, I'm so sorry. Is there anybody with you? No, I want to go. And I hung up. And Lily, I crawled to the sofa and I was there for about a week. And I just want to die. I want to die. I just don't want to be here anymore. I really don't want to be here anymore. If there was a button that I could have pressed then, I would have been gone. I just didn't want to live anymore, only for my two beautiful children and my little grandsons. If I never had them, I wouldn't be here. So I was down on the sofa and I couldn't eat, and I love to eat, and I couldn't eat, and I just wanted to die. I wanted to die. God, please take me. So then I mentioned it to my husband, of course, obviously. He came home. I said, you got to come home. He came home. And I said, Kevin, this is what's happened. He said, I thought I heard somebody say something about this. I said, what? What did you just say? And he said, I don't know what I'm talking about. I don't know what I'm talking about. And he goes downstairs. I said, what the heck is going on here? So I called Peter back because my daughter does a lot of traveling with her job. And like I said, my son's name will ever. And I called Peter back and I said, Peter, I just found this out about myself. And he did the same thing. He started pounding and pounding and pounding. And I said, but Dad just said that he knew something was going on. He said, Mom, I don't want you to get mad. Just stop. Just stop and just listen. He said, but you gotta, I said, what's going on? Will someone please tell me? He said, well, Stephanie went out for dinner with my little niece, who I just adored. And I guess Lily, when they'd be together, they'd be talking about, their grandfather. And, they would do that quite frequently over the years, talk about, I wonder where he is. And, just kids wondering where their grandfather is and what have you. But this particular night, my little niece said to my daughter, talking about their grandfather again, my theory is that there's two fathers. Stephanie said to her, you said that twice tonight. Who said that to you? And she came out and said who it was. It was my middle sister. Told me. And she said, so Lily, they didn't know what to do with that information. Here I was getting ready to go down to Uncle Jim to a family reunion. I was on cloud nine, finally, after all those years of being a disgruntled human being. And here I was with bells on my shoes, and they didn't know what to do. My sister in Ohio had sent me a picture of my father's mother, and she was identical to me. And she sent me two pictures of my father and Lily. They were the same two pictures that were shown to me when I was a little tiny girl. They just came back to me. Boom. I saw these pictures before, but I have forgotten about them. And where I was so little. And I remembered the exact same two pictures. And one of the pictures was his full name and his Air Force number. It was his contact information. So things were starting to brighten a little because I remember if my grandmother bought me anything, my mother's sister would argue with her and get mad with her because my grandmother was not treating her children but buying things for me. And I remember one day we came out of a mall and she happened to be there in her car. Myself and my grandmother were going to the bus and she had a little coat for me. So my aunt said, Mom, get in the car and I'll drive you and Caroline home. And when she got it, we got in the car. She said, what's in the bag? She said, oh, that's a little coat for Caroline. Well, Lily, she said that much to her. My grandmother said, stop the car. Joan, stop the car. And she got out and she said, Caroline, get out. She opened the back door for me to get out and I got out. And I think, oh my God, this woman, I hope oh my God, my grandmother was an incredible woman. But I feel that my father might have been sending her money from time to time. Because I do know that he left my mother a substantial amount of money that I just learned after finding out about him. Because my sister, when I called her, told me. And I think that he was sending her, like one time I came home from school in high school and there was this beautiful Hudson Bay coat made from, the big fox fur and the Eskimos all. And she said, go in and see what's on Grandma's bed. And I went in like, holy cow, you're going to get aunts and uncles all ruffled about this one. That's for sure. I thought to myself, but she was very proud to present it. And I really think it was my father who, was sending her money from time to time. These gifts would appear and nobody would say anything. And I think she was probably telling everyone her dad sent her the money for this. So nobody would say anything, of course, about that.
So your birth father knew about you.
He did. He was in my life for about 3.5 years, I'm thinking, because I can vaguely remember him. I remember him, and I'm sorry, I missed that part.
No, you did say he took pictures of you as a child.
He did, and
Just
yeah, he did.
Why did he not stay in your life?
Because
Was
he had a
this a
wife and 3
secret?
kids at home.
Yep, he had okay, this was a secret relationship.
Of course.
Yeah.
And I guess when he was finally leaving, I don't know. I don't know the details. I don't know anything, Lily. I just know that he went back to his wife and 3 girls. I mean, what was he going to do, Lily? Stay here and raise another man's 3 children and me?
Yeah.
Both of them are at fault, but what did mommy think that he was going to? And she was in love with him. I know she was in love. I was told that. So you think that this man was going to turn his back on his 3 children?
Yeah.
I mean, she was playing with fire and everybody got burned, and I'm the product of that.
Yep.
So, God loved them. I love both of them. Look at, out of all the kids, I have done well in life, and how ironic seeing I was the orphan and the product of this relationship. So I have 2 beautiful children to have done really, really well. They had to be self-sufficient before I died, and they are more than self-sufficient. 2 beautiful little grandsons, and they are my happiness, my life. And so anyway, Lily, I'm going to get back to my daughter arriving home from her business trip, and she shows up at the house, and she said, "Mom, what's wrong?" And I said to her, "Did you know that mommy is not advanced?" And she broke right away. It was just like instant. "Mom, yeah." She said, "My niece, we went out to dinner and she said this, but mom, we didn't think it was true." And she said, I was afraid to hurt you. You were going to Houston and we were going to monitor myself and Peter and Dad. And like, Mom, I'm so sorry. And I said, "It's okay. It's okay. I understand. It's okay." So I opened my email and I said, "Look," and this was a picture of my grandmother. I said, "That's my grandmother." And she said, "Oh, Mom, that's you." I said, "I know. Isn't this beautiful? I finally look like somebody." And then there were pictures. My sister in Ohio started to send more pictures. And Lily, my son, is identical to him. Identical. So that was just like amazing to see that. So anyway, she said, "Mom, don't call." I said, "What the heck is going on?" She said, "Do not call your sisters because you're mad and it's going to be all about what you said to them, not about what they've done to you. Do not call anybody. And please don't. Let's get our heads wrapped around this." So what she did when we cried and, celebrated, because actually when the people in Alabama told me to take my new identity and run, don't look back. So I was pretty excited to hear them, say that. And so I did. I took it and ran. But she said, "Well, let's just leave this be." So what she did when she left my house, she went to this middle sister who supposedly told my niece. And she went down and knocked on her door, and she was really surprised that my daughter was there. And anyway, she sat down and she said, "Well, what are you doing today, sweetheart?" And she said, "Well, and did you tell my niece this about Mom? Did you?" And Lily, she just topped and danced and skipped and bounced from wall to wall. "I didn't say that. I did not say that. And she's a liar. And her effing ship is sinking." I did not say that. And so, however long that visit was, I had no idea. But on the way home, my child calls me and says, Mom, it wasn't her. It must be my older sister. And I said, I said, it's not my older sister. She's very private and she would never want anybody to find this out. Obviously, it was a secret. No, she did that. And then my niece got involved, and she said she didn't say that to my child. And anyway, my child just shut down from her, and they were really close too. And then finally she said, okay, I did say it. I did tell you. I did say that. I'll admit that I did say that. So the next thing, my niece comes over to visit me, and I hugged her so tight. And I said, my family, it's so good to see you. And she said, if I had have known this sooner, I would have told you, because I had just lost my dad. My dad lived to be 91, and he retired as chief of police. And so I'm very proud that he was a good person. And when they found out, people in his community found out I was here, the mayor called me and wanted me to come. He wanted to tell me all about my dad. Yeah. So this niece was here, and she was telling me, I swear I would have told you if I had known. I would have put something in your mailbox, and anyway, we had found out that I was talking to the middle sister who told her. Her son called me from away, and he said, are you sure you have your dates right? Because I knew this 7 years ago, and I didn't believe it, because my little niece I'm talking about, she told me at a wedding that you had a different father 7 years ago. And I said, well, the little snitch, she just left my home and told me she would have told me. And she actually knew 7 years prior to, so kudos to her. So I called my older sister, and I said, what I had just learned through DNA. And she said, you found your family. You go be with them. That was the response from this woman who I adored and looked at her as being a mother figure. You found your family, go be with them. And I was like crying. And she said, well, see, this is why we didn't tell you, because insinuating I wasn't strong enough mentally to handle it. Little does she know I have quite a supportive family, and it should have been told a long time ago. There's a lot of medical stuff that I needed to know. And I have a brain tumor, and I've had others, and nobody, even when I became a mom, they should have told me, but they didn't. So then I called my middle sister, and she said, yes, that's true. She said, and your father gave mommy XYZ dollars when he left, treating her like she was a prostitute. And I said, well, you know what, sweetheart? That money bought you a lot of things that you wouldn't have had if he hadn't have done that. So, you're not going to get any apologies from me. So basically, sweetheart, how this has ended, I was very angry, running to people that I would see in the supermarket, anywhere. Anybody, listen to me, please. This is what happened to me. A little ashamed, embarrassed about doing that, but it just, not that I felt any better afterwards, but I just had to do it. And so they kind of, they're embarrassed. They got caught. I've been asking for my dad for years to my middle sister. She didn't tell me. And, I was sick. And she said, well, we don't know what our Vance family has. Here I was, Lily, really sick. And this is what they would say. We were at dinner. Well, we don't know what our Vance family has. They knew all along. My whole family knew about me my whole life. So that's it. I'm estranged from them. I am doing a little better. I don't think I forgive them. Yeah, I do. I wish that they would get the help that they need. I wish that it was me and I could change places with them. I would dislike the fact that this happened to our family. And am I the reason that they were so angry with me? Is it because of my birth? Maybe I was a lightning bolt in their childhood. I don't know. My mother obviously held me. My father was giving me attention. Did they feel neglected? So I love them, and they said that they tried to protect me, and I could accept that, Lily. But when I go and think about the cruelty and how they treated me and my children, it would be different if they were protective and loving and kind and treated me as an equal. So no, I don't accept that they were trying to protect me. Not at all, not in the least.
Yeah. Yeah, they can say they were trying to protect you, but if the actions don't match that.
No.
Yeah.
No. And it's really confusing too, because sometimes they were nice, sometimes they were nasty. It was very, very confusing, which is why I hung on for so long. I feel at peace now. The stress. I mean, we're very close. Us four people that I sent that picture. We're very, very close. And when one is hurting, we're all hurting. And I think the kids, especially my daughter, is hurting more for me than I am for myself. I think that she's always trying to make me happy, and I'm happy, and I tell her that it's not her responsibility to make me happy. I'm working on that, but just continue making me smile with those two little boys, and that's the cure. Lily, this is beautiful. I found my dad's little sister she's living in Cincinnati. And Aunt Nita, when she found out I was here, paid like $40 to get a Christmas card here to me in time. I have a stack of cards. I'd say they're a foot high. And every time I go to the mailbox, there's presents. And when she said, Caroline, I don't know why your daddy didn't tell me, sweetheart. I don't know why your daddy didn't tell me. We were very close. Anyway, my husband and I flew down and met my Aunt Nita. And she gave me things that my dad gave her. And she said, honey, what was your favorite color? And what did you tell me your favorite color was? I said, it's green, Aunt Nita. And she said, she bent down in the cupboard and she brought up this little green rooster. She said, your daddy made that in ceramics, and his name is on the bottom of that. And when you said green, I said, oh my God, this has to go to Caroline because his wife didn't want it. And he gave it to me. And she said, it came full circle. You have it. And I said, oh, Aunt Nita. And I have his police badge too.
Oh, wow.
It's been quite a road. And I can't believe this has happened to me. There's a lot of people. I'm listening to the stories. I go to bed listening to them, Lily. And some of the stories are just so incredibly sad. And I know I'm not alone. And so it's just very tough, and I empathize with every story. It's just brutal. It's very sad.
I understand. You speak about keeping your space from some people. You have some toxic people, and you have some estrangement. I understand that, Caroline, because sometimes you just have to do that when things get too hurtful. Estrangement is some. No one ever chooses estrangement from their family members. Very painful.
And there's too much betrayal to even go back and look them in the eyes. It's just so much betrayal that I can't do this anymore. I can't. And they did tell me in the beginning, if you want to answer, we're here to answer your questions. And what? Are you kidding me? For 58 years, you kept my dad, and I just missed him, Lily. You kept him from me, and now you want to answer my questions? No, it's too late. Sorry. How can I believe a word that comes out of your mouth? So I just had to walk, and I miss them. My sister is going through a horrible time, as I had shared with you in the beginning. I think about her quite often, and I just wish them well, and wish them long lives, and hoping that I don't want them to be hurting. There's enough hurt already. So I'm trying to heal, and I hope that they can.
Caroline, if anyone listening wanted to reach out to you personally, how do you feel about that?
Oh, absolutely. I have no problem with that, sweetheart.
Okay. If people wanted to find you on Facebook, what would they type in?
They would type in Caroline Sorg, dance champion. I know that's a mouthful.
No, that's fine. I'll put that in the show notes with the 4 separate names, right? And Caroline, thank you so much for coming on and having to rethink about this and sharing your story and what you've been through today. I really appreciate
Thank you,
it.
Lily, for taking the time with me today. I really appreciate it.
These stories are here for us to identify with. If you are an NPE and would like to share your story, email npestories@gmail.com. You do not have to give any identifying information. If you are an NPE and would like to share your story, I'd like to hear from you. Subscribe to this podcast to hear more. Come heal with us.